you always get people that aren't just invested, they're emotionally invested in XYZ. And I'm very bullish gold and Bitcoin and all these things. But when I see people that are emotionally invested, I get a little concerned. And then I layer social media on top of that. I'm like, wow, how does it work today?
Well, you were dead right in your observation. And I've noticed this. I'm like, I went out of my way to find out who are these people getting really aggressive about Bitcoin with me? The people who are saying there can only be one, the kind of zealotry over. Now, one thing is fascinating is those systems of stores of value, gold and Bitcoin or anything else, they've got an embedded behavioral incentive. If I can persuade you, it goes up in price. And and I'm going to benefit. So therefore it is in my economic interest to be a zealot because I'm incentivized to do so. And it's the same as the missionaries. That's why it has that religious connotation about it, because it has this behavioral incentive system, which is we get more power if we convince other people to come into our religion. And we do this by a number of things, but the most obvious one is by saying, well, if you don't believe in my God, you're going to hell. Right? The ultimate penalty system. Right? That's a behavioral incentive. It's the opposite way round. So, and I will go to heaven, right?
Or if you don't buy Bitcoin, you're going to be poor. And
that comment really angers me, is have fun being poor.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's the religious connotation. I was going to write an article about it and I stepped back from it. Just because I've noted this too, but I also understand it's also a feature. It's a bug and a feature.
I put that out on Twitter. I'm like, okay, it's got this cult following. It is what it is. Is that good or bad for the price? Because I always listen to Chanos. And Chanos always talks about cult stocks being a potential short. And because there's so much emotion around it. And I'm like, okay, I get that. But then I look at Tesla, which is a cult stock, and that cult has driven the price up to the moon. So I don't know, is it good or bad?
Well, because again, humans are narrative-driven creatures, right? Storytelling is as old as humans. And what's so interesting about both Tesla and particularly Bitcoin or gold is it has the embedded savior within it, and because it's money itself. It's not like a stock because you've got nowhere valuing it really. Yes, we have the stock to flow and a bunch of charts, but really it's Metcalfe's law. It's just an adoption of trust. And how far can that go? If that trust collapses, then it's worth nothing. Same with all money. Same with gold itself. If we don't trust gold, if we don't believe gold has value, it has no value. So there's that kind of whole embedded thing. Tesla, what's interesting about Tesla, it has an embedded kind of God philosophy in it as well, which is that this technology is going to change the world.
Right.
And yes, it is going to change the world, but does all the profit accrue to Tesla? No, but the narrative does. And so it's why these things have been so successful, because again, they're all about a future change. Apple doesn't get that because it doesn't have that narrative. It doesn't have, if you invest in Apple, everything's going to change and things will get better. So if you're a millennial and you can see the issues with climate change and you want to do something about it and you're angry because the baby boomers don't, well, Tesla is the way to drive your narrative. And Bitcoin is the same for those people who've been screwed over by this wage deflation and globalization and all of this thing. Bitcoin is the one God that could save them.
Right.
Because they can get a chance to accumulate wealth. And they don't get a chance. And I think that's true. I don't think it's a false narrative necessarily. I don't think Tesla is a false narrative. Tesla's more difficult because it's a stock. And, clearly he's a showman and a bit of a fraud. But what that whole thing stands for, he's now got access to unlimited capital. So he's fine. So that's not going to go wrong from here. Sure, it can fall in price. But this Bitcoin narrative is really interesting because it drives at the heart of everything being wrong. And there's something that can change it. Gold favors people with the politics of nostalgia. If we only went back to how it was, and they look back and think the 1950s was a glorious time. Well, guess what? In the 1950s, none of these baby boomers were in the workforce. They hadn't had to borrow money. Of course, it was a better time in some respect. Obviously, not really either in longevity of life and quality of life terms. But that's perceive it. So gold has that nostalgia about it when the times were better, and Bitcoin has that optimism about it, as this could be different. And the kind of crypto anarchists and others hook onto the narrative of we could have a different way. And I keep saying to people, stop thinking about what you think it's all about, and you need to follow what it is actually about, because people want it to be this libertarian, unregulated world, but that's not happening. So if full adoption is what you want, then you have to bring more people into your religion, and it's a religion of trust in money, and I don't have a problem with it at all. So I'm not using it as a slur against Bitcoin. I think it's a feature, not a bug. It gets a little too tribal, which is the bug for me. But social media, this is where it gets difficult, because it's, again, the rise of behavioral economics is you can affect different people by telling them different stories, and you can have multiple narratives at the same time. And that's what's going on in the crypto space. It becomes you versus me, because you like Ethereum and I like Ripple and somebody else like XRP. And what it becomes is I want my value system to go up because I'm desperate to make money, and therefore my answer online is it's to the exclusion of all others. But when you're fighting for your own system of money and a way of making your own wealth, you're driven by those narratives to say it's us versus you, because you want more of the capital flow. Now, I think that's also a feature of 2016-17 bull markets, when you didn't really know who was going to win out in this. But right now it seems to be opening out. And as institutional money comes in, there's plenty of opportunity for tons of these projects to do well and tons of them to fail in the perfect way that capital systems allocate capital over time. So I just don't worry about that. But I understand from the beginning, in that world between, let's say, 2013 to 2017, it was a fight for who can get the most trust for their network.
Right.
Same with social media, why Facebook won and Friends reunited didn't.
Yeah.
It's who could drive the most trust and the most connections.
You've talked about the doom loop all the time, which is kind of this positive feedback loop, but in a downward spiral. This creates the opposite going up and I know a lot of people in the comments right now are going to say, oh yeah, but the governments will ban it. And I totally get that. I think they'll make it illegal, but I think it'll most likely have a hell of a run before it's a big enough player for the governments to
yeah, and I'm not sure I'm not sure. I've read all the IMF papers, the BIS papers, the ECB, BOJ, all of these guys. None of them have talked about anything except regulating crypto on the on-ramps and off-ramps. They just want their tax. They want their tax, and they don't want it to be used for illicit activities that are within their jurisdiction. That's it. Now, do they try and do something in due course and try and get rid of it? Well, there's going to be another jurisdiction that allows it. That you can't stamp something out on the internet. China's tried to ban it, Russia's tried to ban it, India tried to ban it, all of them failed. So I don't think it gets banned, but sure, it's a risk, we need to price it.
But they did that with gold.
Gold, again, this is a false narrative.
Okay.
So gold, they did it in the US, and the US gold flowed to Switzerland and elsewhere. Gold around the rest of the world traded freely. Americans look at this as their own personal narrative, but it didn't happen anywhere else. So it wasn't a global phenomena.
Right.
And in the end, US citizens held gold, but offshore. It's always been thus. Same with Turks right now. They're not supposed to be using gold. So they use Bitcoin. Everybody finds a way of circumventing capital flows because they always have.